Welcome. My name is Stephanie Fortunato, and I'm the Deputy Director of the City of Providence Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism, and I'm very pleased to be with you here this afternoon for the launch of SeenUnseen Providence, and in many ways, the launch of the Providence International Arts Festival. It's a day we've been looking forward to for a really long time. Lynn McCormick will be joining us a little bit later. She got a little bit delayed this afternoon with many of the last-minute details, but I'm happy to be with you here today. For me, SeenUnseen Providence is the type of community collaboration that's what the festival is all about. The festival has been a catalyst for artists to create and share their work with a larger audience. Mary Beth came to us with this idea of blowing up some of her portraits and putting them on buildings as a result of her conversations with community members about their desire to really get to know and to see the people of Providence. And the festival seemed like the perfect platform to share that. In addition to Mary Beth and the participants who agreed to let her photograph them, there are so many people in our community we have to thank for this project. We have one who wants to be recognized right now, I think. I recognize many of you in this room actually from the portraits, which is exciting. I feel like celebrities were walking into the lobby out there. But many months of planning went into this project, and so many partners from the public and private sector came together to make this public art installation possible, including 6 very forward-thinking property owners, funders, RISCA, Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, our department, and many others who came forward to make it possible. But the thing that amazes me most about seeing this very public work come together is how profoundly personal the experience of viewing the portraits really is. I know that many of us have been filled with great emotion standing before these portraits on the streets, or I should say, I know I have. This really is an opportunity for our community to come together, to share and celebrate the good work, and to help each other work out the meaning of it all. So I think this afternoon's panel is a good starting point to think about all of that. I want to upfront thank RISD for sponsoring this talk. I saw John Smith come in before. Hi, thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone, really, for being here. And thank you to Mary Beth for bringing us together today and helping us to see Providence a little more clearly. So I'm going to introduce Jan Howard, who's the Chief Curator and Houghton Metcalf Jr. Curator of Prints, Drawing, and Photographs here at RISD. And she's going to help introduce Mary Beth and her work. So thank you.
I did want to show at least this very first image that we're starting and a couple of others today, because this is one from the museum's collection that we acquired a couple of years ago. Mary Beth is a Providence-based photographer who is also a native of Brockton, Massachusetts, and she's made the people of her communities the subject of major projects, including Seen and Unseen Providence. And also, this project that I have on the screen is the City of Champions, which she did for Brockton, and she'll address that a little bit more in her remarks. But before she speaks, I just wanted to familiarize you with some of her past accomplishments. Many of you may know her as the staff photographer for the Providence Journal, where she worked from 1995 to 2001. And in '96, she introduced Our Times, a weekly column in that paper, which consisted of a single photograph and then a short essay about everyday life outside of the headlines in the newspaper. That column was nominated twice for a Pulitzer Prize, among many other awards. Her work has also been published in the Boston Globe, in the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and she has exhibited nationally and internationally. Additionally, she's earned support from the Massachusetts Foundation for the Humanities, Brown University, the Rhode Island State Council for the Arts, and garnered many awards. So Mary Beth is also recognized as an educator, and she's the artist in residence at the International Charter School in Pawtucket. It's a bilingual school where she works with K through 5th grade and leads a teaching program to document for the students themselves to document their cultures. She also directs the photography projects at the Groden Center in Providence, where she works with autistic teens to express themselves through photography. And in addition, she teaches documentary photography at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. Mary Beth has a master's degree in photojournalism from the University of Missouri, a school that's long been recognized for its journalism program. But it wasn't really through, I think, the classroom where she learned to be the accomplished photographer that she is today. In recent decades, photographers have been challenging the practice of kind of coming to a subject that might be unfamiliar and quickly taking a photograph of that, especially in the practice of documentary photography. The best photographers working in this realm are self-conscious about their position, and the implicit power there is, that power relationship between the photographer and his or her subject, especially if the subject is on the margins of society. This more critical approach to making photographs was something that Mary Beth became aware of through some of her classmates in college and really began to study and educate herself about as she finished her college studies. And I thought it might be helpful actually today, before she starts to talk, to look at a few of the photographers who've been influential for her and have helped her come to terms with how she would respond as a photographer. Let's see if I can get this to. So one of these is Fazl Sheikh, and this is a project that he did documenting refugee camps in Kenya, where people were fleeing the wars in Somalia, Sudan, and Ethiopia in 1992 and 93. And Sheikh didn't come to the community and immediately begin taking photographs when he arrived, as many of the other photojournalists did, but began spending several days just speaking with the people in the community and asking to speak with the elders who were part of that community. And those elders were actually very surprised by his interest in speaking with them and the position he took, as they began to see themselves, as they'd been portrayed in the media, as kind of not having the status that they had had in their original communities. So that was one project that she was very impressed by. Another has been the work of Dawood Bey, and this is from a series of images that he made. This is around 1990, so the time that she's in school, where he was setting up photography studios on the streets across the United States. Using a 4x5-inch Polaroid camera, he would set up a tripod on the street and have people come to him there to take the photographs. An advantage of working with the Polaroid, which also Sheikh worked with, is that this camera allowed them to give an image to the person that they were photographing right away, right at that moment, but also it made a negative for them so that they can continue to print from that and distribute that later. But it's also a camera where it's a slower process. It's not like a 35 millimeter or your iPhone where you quickly snap a photographs. It takes a little more time. It's on a tripod, and there's more interaction just in the process of making the picture. There he is. But anyway, so that's, he, as an outsider, I'm sorry, let me just say that again. So before setting up his camera in those communities to take the photographs, what he would do is just spend time in the communities and become a kind of familiar figure there, so that people would be comfortable actually working with him when he did ask them to take their photograph. And he was an insider in the community he worked with for the most part as he was doing this series of photographs. But he also wanted to be able to photograph outside of his community and wanted to have photographers feel comfortable doing that even when it wasn't their own community. And so that's something Mary Beth had taken a workshop with Dawood Bey, and he felt that you have to come to this kind of a project with your own kind of personal ethic, with how you will develop relationships with people and how you will be conscious of that power relationship you have with your subject, and also your own biases and what you bring to a project. Another important example for Mary Beth was this work by Wendy Ewald, who has long had a practice of working with children and adults, actually encouraging them to make photographs of themselves and making their own photographs, giving them cameras. This project in Kentucky on the left, they had cameras, the children had them in their hands for a long period of time, and she would encourage them to make photographs about their dreams and their own life and how they felt about themselves. But what's also important are these banners that Wendy Ewald began to use in this project here at the Carver Elementary School in Richmond, Virginia, which opened up that idea for Mary Beth as well. So that's been an important project for her. But when I look at just these few projects and the work that has influenced her, you can see that these photographers and Mary Beth see a difference between taking a photograph and really developing a collaborative relationship with the sitter that allows for an image really to be given. And so I see Mary Beth as considering giving subjects ownership of their pictorial in some way and instilling in her young students the importance of telling stories about themselves, instilling in art students the recognition for their own prejudices, encouraging them to account for those in their approach to subject matter. And what I really love about Mary Beth's photographs is in addition to the sheer beauty of the photographs that she takes, is how she does connect with her subject, how engaged she is with her subject. And a lot of those that we've seen on the screen coming in, you really see that direct connection in the eye expressions and the facial expressions, the body language. For me, I see people whose experiences and circumstances might be quite different from my own, but I feel like I can recognize something of myself and connect to them in some way because of the direct relationship she has with those. I think it comes across in the photographs to us as viewers. So I very much look forward to Mary Beth's presentation and welcome her to the podium.
Thank you so much, Jane. I want to go outside and cry now and then come back. Thank you all for coming. I haven't seen this many people I love in one room since my wedding day. It's such an honor to be here at the RISD Museum, and I'm a little bit speechless, but I'll try to get over it. It's been such an amazing collaboration to do this portrait project that's on the walls outside in Providence, and I hope that we can have a good conversation about what it means, and I hope that I can remember what it is I wanted to say to you. I wanted to start by thanking Stephanie Fortunato, Lynn McCormick, and Lizzie Arujo at the Providence Department of Arts, Culture, and Tourism. Those three women are my soul sisters now, and what they went through to get these banners on the buildings is really heroic. And this whole thing has been a collaboration, co-created by many people. So I can't say that enough times about how many people have had a part in getting these pictures up. So thanks to all of you, and I hope I get to you by the end of this talk. I wanted to start here. This is a picture from Our Times, which Jan mentioned, which is a photo column I did when I was on staff at the Providence Journal in the 90s, which was a very long time ago, before my mass art students were born, they tell me. And what I learned, even though I had a master's in journalism, what I learned is that the news wasn't really something that interested me. And what really interested me was daily life and how we could look outside the way the news was defined and look at who lived in Rhode Island and what life was like for us here. So the Providence Journal was very generous in those days, and I had one day a week to photograph and write. And so this ran in the paper on Mondays, every Monday on the inside of the Rhode Island section for almost 6 years. And, you know, it was a way for me to explore communities. These are cloistered nuns in Pawtucket. These are Narragansett Indian boys in Exeter. And so I had this day, a week, to just explore, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. Her name is Honoria Lopes. She was related to a woman who worked in the newsroom with me. And she was a Cape Verdean lady sewing baby clothes to send to someone who had a baby in Cape Verde. This is a woman named Tammy and her family that I met on a playground, and just, you know, I could go home with people. And in those days, I was in my 20s, and I didn't know that any of these critiques existed about documentary photography. I just thought that the world was my oyster, and anybody who would let me go home with them, I could photograph them and put it in the Providence Journal. So this was where it all started. This is a woman named Lisa, who was an old Italian-American lady in a very prosperous part of Federal Hill, but that had come down, and she wanted to be photographed, but she said, "Not my face, sweetheart," and she got her Baccarat portrait of herself and said I could photograph that. And this is the last Our Times I did in 2000, which was the funeral of a Cambodian monk. This is down near the temple on Hanover Street. And so then I went off the grid to get married and have babies and all that. And in the course of all that, I started thinking about my hometown of Brockton, Mass. I grew up there in the 70s and 80s, and I loved it there. It's a working class city. It used to be called the Shoe City, and I grew up there. This is my dad, who's 100% Irish, and my mom, who's 100% Italian, which my husband likes to say, like everyone else in Brockton of my age, is half Irish and half Italian. And it is a proud, hardworking place, and the people that I grew up with, this is my best friend's family. I see Michael here. This is the pool I swam in every weekend in the summer, and they were half Irish and half Italian too. And so as kids, we experienced an unbelievable community and an unbelievable sense of connectedness. My good friend in high school is Greek. This is the Greek Orthodox Church. So I went back to Brockton to photograph this after having children in like 2005, 2006. This is Mrs. Mathers, who to me is a representative of kind of the old prosperity of Brockton, the old shoe factory money and the beautiful wealth that had once existed there. But what happened to Brockton was deindustrialization. The shoe factories closed, the economy declined. There was such a thing as white flight, and people of color from all over the developing world came in and started to change the face of Brockton. I had left by then. So the narratives through which I heard about this change were through the news media, which were very much focused on the problems. This is a very special family coming in, so we're going to let them sit down. Mr. St. Louis. So I was aware that Brockton was changing. I wasn't living there at the time, but I was hearing about the changes. And this is Francella McFarlane, who had come from Jamaica. And what happened was sort of two-pronged. I was reading in the media about the city, but the way the news is defined, only the dysfunction about a place like Brockton ever made it up to the level of awareness. And so that insistence on dysfunction over and over really accumulated in everyone's mind about what a place like Brockton is, which didn't match with how it felt to be from there. And so I went back to start photographing and find out about this dysfunction. And, you know, as much as I love my old Irish uncles, they're not the most open-minded guys in the world. And, you know, they would say things like, I hear there are signs up in the Caribbean that say, if you want a handout, go to Brockton. Or Brockton's turning into a third world country. Or one uncle who is famous for his open-mindedness said, you know, the blacks have ruined my city. So I thought, really? Is that really what's happened? So these pictures were a way for me to explore what actually happened. And what I found out was that all of these huge forces, like the economy, like world migrations, had affected this place. And these newcomers were kind of being blamed for the landscape that they now lived on. So when I went back and tried to make these pictures, and I started thinking about things like white flight, and how do you show white flight? How do you show a former prosperity? How do you show decline? And this picture, my Uncle Jim, I think is here. I saw Jim, said, when he saw this picture, he said, everybody depressed in Brockton? Why are all your pictures so depressed? And I thought, you're right, I'm doing it. I'm creating a narrative that's purely negative. I've got to loosen up and find the joy and the complexity in the story. So, you know, the newspapers, an editor at the Boston Globe said, we don't go to Brockton unless there's crime or corruption. And so I started to think, what's the cumulative effect of this public presentation of a place like this? How does it affect the economy? How does it affect investment in real estate? How does it affect people's, you know, sort of psychic well-being? So, you know, the problems are real. This is a funeral of a young boy who was killed in an argument over a video game. A woman from Haiti who was shot through her door in the middle of the night by a gang. They had the wrong house. The urban decay is real, but so is the Haitian church that's been built in an abandoned shoe factory. Many undocumented immigrants who are trying to find a job and make a life there. This is Luigi, who was born in Haiti, and this is her wedding day. New Cape Verdean restaurant on the Main Street, Brockton. I'm going too long, I think. A band from Guinea-Bissau practicing in a basement that plays at weddings and parties, christenings. Benvinda Barnes' hand-embroidered curtains. That doesn't make it into the Boston Globe to counter the stories of the murders. Benvinda's curtains. Mr. DeGrassa, who in his 80s works at a salad dressing factory in Brockton. Or the LeBrun family, who 6 months after the earthquake in Haiti all came to Brockton for their daughter's graduation from Brockton High. So this question of how a public perception of a place affects the people came up for me twice. Once was in the inauguration of the first female mayor, Linda Balzotti. She said from the podium at her inauguration, "We all know what everyone thinks about us when we say we're from Brockton, but we're gonna go out there and do a good job and counter that stereotype." And I thought, oh my God. And then the Brockton High School graduation, this is Melissa Cruz, whose family from the Dominican Republic. She's in the marching band. The principal at Brockton High School said to the graduates the same year, "You all know what people will think of you when they find out you're from Brockton, but your job is to hold up your head and prove them wrong." And I thought, oh my God, it's so assumed that they're saying it from the podium to these kids, what they have to work against because of this public perception. So it was like they weren't being seen. Who the people were, what the place was, wasn't being seen at all. So with many collaborators, I came up with this idea, okay, so let's make these big, huge banners and let's show people who these people are who are living in this town. And these pictures were made by the same company, Sign Design, who did the ones here in Providence. And we started putting them up all over downtown Brockton and asking people to come downtown and not only interact with the people in the photographs, but interact with the space. This is my mother's good friend, Mrs. Nesrella. It wasn't easy to get buildings in Brockton. There was no Stephanie Fortunato and Lynn McCormick in Brockton. It was me banging on doors, and so it was friends who said, Mrs. Nesrella actually said, "You can do whatever you want with my building, honey." So this was in 2012. This is Mr. DeGrassa and Luigi up at the beginning of the installation. This is Mr. DeGrassa and his daughter when the pictures went up. He said to her, "I never thought I'd receive any honor in this country." Here's Luigi. We held walking tours. So this is a picture that is Nancy D'Souza. This became sort of a contested picture. This picture went up on the side of Messiah Baptist Church, and people argued about, is she dealing drugs? Are those blunts in her waistband? What's she doing? Why does she have that midriff on? And so, I write a lot of grants and do a lot of language crafting about public conversations, et cetera. Well, this is what it looks like. This person was not happy with that picture. And this is what it looks like when people aren't really listening to one another. So, all of our language, and, she said this Legion Parkway, this was an area of drug dealing and really a lot of prostitution. We've done so much to clean it up. Now you've put this girl in the building, you're going to drag it back down. And I'm saying, but you can't go one block in this town without seeing this girl. So, they had a public forum about this picture. The Reverend at the church had a public forum just about this picture. And I said, we could all go down and chop the thing down in a big ceremony and put it in my car and I'll take it back to Providence. But the thing is, the girl is still here in this town. And so why can't we accept that? Why can't we look at her? Why can't we figure out who she is? So we didn't exactly hug, but we got to some kind of... Okay. So my husband Chad Galtz, likes to say that he tells me something and then I ignore it, and a year later I say, you know what I think? And then I try to think it was my idea. So for at least a year, he'd been saying, you could have our Times again, because now it's the internet age. You could have a column again. And I dismissed it. And then I said, you know what? I think I'd like to do a blog. And he's like, good idea. So I got this idea that I just wanted to meet people in Providence and go back to our times and go back to just walking the streets. I had done a couple of projects involving undocumented immigrants that were really hard, people who were scared, they didn't want to be photographed. I thought, I need a break from that. I just want to make pictures. So I'm very blessed in this town to have creative, brilliant, generous, funny friends, one of whom is RISD's own Lucinda Hitchcock, with whom and my other group of friends, we talked about seen and unseen. It feels right, like it feels like a heading I could get behind of like what is seen and what isn't seen and what do we think we know when we see someone. So Lucy did this beautiful, beautiful logo, which is reproduced under the banners. She also made the beautiful silver signs that are under all the banners in the city. And so I started just photographing my neighbors. And this is Rose, who's here somewhere, Rose and James. And my friend Tina Triforis and I had gone to hear Martha Rossler speak. Martha Rossler was one of the people who really launched the biggest critiques about documentary photography and how it was almost a completely unethical, indefensible practice, that it was always a person of privilege in a place of unprivilege, of lower privilege, and that person taking the picture and taking it out. And so she made this comment from the podium that said, basically, I think any kind of photography involving people is indefensible. So I said, Tina, we got to go talk to Martha Rossler. So we got in line, and I said to her, here's the thing, I love photographing people. What would make it okay for you? This is sort of the godmother of this critique. And she said, here's what I think. I think if people can escape your gaze, that you photograph only people who have the choice of escaping your gaze. You ask them permission, and you give them some agency over the context in which the picture ends up. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna work with that. And so I started making portraits of my neighbors. This is Rose, Mrs. Raftery, very kind to me. This is the first picture I made, really, and I rang her bell, and I gave her this big, long blur spiel, and she said, I'm an artist, darling, come on in. Oh, thank God. This is a guy named Scott, who I saw on Manton Ave. This is Lily. And, one of the things was, why does a picture work and another picture doesn't? I'd been banging my head against a picture all morning, and it wasn't working. And this is Mr. Rodriguez and his granddaughter. They came out of their building, and in 3 frames, this picture happened. I also need to say that Michelle McDonald's here. And dear, brilliant Michelle McDonald has looked at every one of these pictures and all of the other possible outtakes and weighed in on each one. And she has been a dear friend and editor for so many years. I've sent her pictures, and she writes me emails back saying, 1, love. 2, nope, 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 nope. Reshoot. So I have no idea how we are on time. Unlike in the 90s when I was an omniscient 25-year-old, I wanted this text to take into account some of these critiques and some of my misgivings. And so on the blog, I have included myself, and I've included myself just as a way of accounting for all this and grappling with it. So I just want to read you this one. This is Fernando Oliveras, who's here in the front row, so I'm just going to read this entry. Okay. Sometimes I see a perfect picture in front of me, the light, the color, the mood, the gesture, the person. In my mind is the criticism that we photographers objectify people, that we commit, quote, the violence of the aesthetic. But at this moment, I am only thrilled by what I see. A man is leaning against the doorway to a mechanic's shop in Olneyville. His hand is resting under his chin. I'm afraid this will change, so I walk quickly toward him. I hear men all around me speaking Spanish, so I hold out my hand and say, in Spanish, please don't move. Would it be okay if I take your picture and explain later? He says, sí. His name is Fernando. I ask where he is from, and he says Guatemala, but he doesn't have time to talk. I go back on another day to give him a print and to find out more about him. We walk through the garage, and he offers me a seat in his tiny office. I ask him about Guatemala. He tells me about a difficult passage through Mexico and crossing the Rio Grande on foot on his way to this country. That was 16 years ago. For 7 years, he has owned this shop. I tell him I want to write something about his life, and he explains that writing is something that he loves to do. When he's gotten home from work, after he's had a shower and begun to relax, words come to him about a woman he loves, about his gratitude for a healthy son and his resolve to keep working so the boy can stay in private school in East Providence. He records them in the notes section of his phone, which he pulls out and shows me. He plays me a video of himself singing a love song he's written. His voice rings out, full of longing. When I began this project, I wrote about Providence as a pie chart of percentages of immigrants coming from Central and South America, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, West Africa. But as I sit in this man's company, I realize how reductive that is, how those ideas just eclipse the fullness of a person. So I'm just going to show you the rest of the pictures quickly. These are the rest of the portraits, although this is Sister Ann Pitts, who said she'd beat me with her cane if I say that she's sitting in the back of this room. This is Buki, whose mother's here, the front row. My dear Sangamate Lee, who's here. I was intimidated, very intimidated by the Orthodox community on the East Side, and I wrote about that in the blog, about meeting with the rabbis and getting letters of reference, and but realizing that all the blocks were kind of my own, about why I was so afraid to approach them. And this is Rachel and Mendel and Marina, who's here and agreed to be on a banner. I'm looking to see where they all are, and I can't see, but I know she's here. This is Pang at the Hmong Church on Dexter. And Omowumi, who lives in Mount Pleasant. And Rhonda. And Tuan, who's here, and whose great little grandbaby is the one making the noise, which is why we can't throw her out. And Tracy, Wellington. Oh, sorry. And this is Wonton St. Louis. I want to end here. Mr. St. Louis I met in the 90s when I was doing Our Times. And when I met them, he's from Haiti. And they had come, his community had started coming from Haiti in the 80s. And when they started worshiping together, they're part of a church community. They started in an apartment in South Providence, maybe 14 families. The community grew, and so by the time I met them in the 90s, they were about 150 people. And they had taken a shop, a metal shop or a jewelry shop, an auto shop, on Anthony Ave off Cranston Street, and the men of the church had renovated this place and whitewashed it and put in rugs. And that's when I met them, and I spent a long time with them photographing and ran the story in the Providence Journal. And then I didn't see him again, and I left the Journal, and our ways parted, and I was in Washington Park photographing for this project. And one of the things I was interesting about that project was through this community of Haitian people, I was able to talk about how immigration happens. People from one area in Haiti came to Providence. The men got jobs in driving school buses. The women were CNAs. They helped each other and grew. So I'm in Washington Park photographing. Here comes a school bus down the street 20 years later, and oh my God, there's Mr. St. Louis driving the school bus. So I jumped up and down, and we exchanged phone numbers. And so I made his portrait for this project. And he invited me to go to the church, which had now almost tripled in membership. There were now almost 500 members of the church. They had bought a plot on Elmwood Ave and built a big church, which is jam-packed every Sunday. And so this community is growing in Providence, and it reminds me so much of all the Italians and Greeks I knew growing up in Brockton. And it reminds me of someone said to me, the Haitians and Cape Verdeans in Brockton are the Irish and Italian of this century. But I think because of race, we don't necessarily make that connection. So these were I knew I wanted him to be big and beautiful. And these are a couple of the Photoshop mock-ups that we submitted. I neglected to mention two things. One is that Christina DeChiara at RISCA was one of the first people that saw the portraits and really encouraged me to try to get funding and really helped me get support to make the portraits. Bert Kranka at AS220 saw my work in Brockton and said, "Why aren't you doing this in Providence?" And so those two people really lit the fire. And then when Lynn McCormick came on board and we started walking the streets and looking at buildings and trying to figure out where the pictures could go, that's when it took off. So it really was co-created. I just want to end with one last thing. My father, who likes to keep me honest, said at the end of my Brockton project, said, when are you going to be done with all this stuff, putting the pictures on the buildings? You really think you changed anybody's mind in Brockton? So I said, I don't know, Dad. I don't know. Maybe I should go try and find out. So I went back to the church where the picture was and interviewed people and asked them, what did you think of having the picture on your building all this whole year? And so I just want to end with some things that people said. Doris Evans said, this picture is a disgrace. I had one friend come to the church and she wrote me a letter and she wanted to know what was wrong with us with those pictures hanging on the church like that. So I'll be honest, I didn't really care for them. I don't think any type of picture like that should have been on our church. All I need is the cross or something, that's it. I don't know what the purpose was of those pictures. Sharon Molden, though, said this. At first, I actually was offended. And then the more I looked at it, the more days I passed it, I realized that this is somebody's existence. It's not about me and what I personally view. That picture has reminded me that I have no right to make judgments about other folks unless I'm willing to become a part of their life and understand what they're working through and working toward. Those pictures have really caused me to take a deeper examination of myself in regards to what kind of relationships I'm building with other people. So then I said, but Sharon, that girl's here. What was it about the photograph? What is it about the picture? And she said, in my busy life, my head and my mind are spinning at such a rate that it's very easy to ignore her. But when she is still and in my face, I can't help but stop and see her. I can't just walk by and play that she doesn't exist. So I'm going to end there before our panel. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Mary Beth. All right, so I really enjoyed that. The idea of this being co-created by a community and just you sharing the story of the process, it was really quite wonderful. We thought that the best way to understand this project was by bringing in some more community voices. And so we have a panel of people here, and I'm happy to introduce them. I think we're going to change up the program a little bit because of the time. We were going to have them speak a little bit and then have a Q&A with the audience, but I think if everyone's okay with it, we'll just go to a Q&A. Okay, great, because it seems like there's a lot of good ideas in the audience here. So I will introduce the panelists, and you can come up to the stage. I'm happy to have Annie Valk back in Providence. Annie is a historian and educator with specialties in oral history and public humanities. From 2007 to 2014, she worked at Brown University's Center for Public Humanities, where she collaborated with students and community members to create exhibits, cell phone tours, and installations to share the history of places that matter in Providence. She currently serves as Associate Director for Public Humanities at Williams College, and Annie's going to help us moderate the conversation. Christopher Johnson is here with us. He wears many hats. Do you want to come on up? He's a writer, a teacher, a speaker, a performer in Rhode Island and nationally. He's participated in spoken word slams, performances, and showcases, including Providence's Grand Slam, the National Grand Slam. We like to call him the Poet Laureate of Providence. Some of you may know that. He'll be performing in the festival with one of his new works, The Freedom Project, a collaboration with Everett on Saturday, as well as with RPM Voices. Sean Thomas is a playwright, producer, director, actor, and moderator. She's written scripts for 3 musical presentations, and most recently she is producing and moderating One Voice, a musical celebration of United Voices of Rhode Island, commissioned for the festival, performed on Saturday as part of the opening celebration in Kennedy Plaza. And finally, Fernando Oliveros, the owner of Fernando Auto Repair on Plainfield Street. Originally from Guatemala, Fernando came to Providence in 1997. He lives in Olneyville, and he appears on the banner on the Custom House Street. And so we've heard a little bit about him. And Mary Beth, come on back up here. So please welcome our panel.
All right, so I think what we'll do while we get our panelists settled is I'd love to field a couple of questions from the crowd, maybe a couple at once, and then we can get some replies and responses. In the very back. Oh, okay. So questions, comments, insights.
Hi, I want to thank Mary Beth for opening the portal of possibilities here in Providence. I want to say that I actually know some of these people that you took pictures of because I ride the bus. And it makes, but you know, these portraits invite you into their hearts. And you look beyond skin, and you look beyond landscape, and you look to possibilities. And I want to say thank you.
This one coming from the side.
I'd love to ask Mary Beth what the subjects of the photographs that have been enlarged into banners, what the people have told you about what the experience was for them.
Thank you, Maria. Maybe we should ask some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Should we?
Yeah.
Should we ask Fernando? Should I understand the question? What was it then like to be among the banners? What is it like? What was the on the banner?
Well, it's before to say something. Good afternoon to everybody. It's something amazing. I'm very happy for it. Thank you.
What about what you said about immigrants calling you, people calling you? Fernando told me he's received a number of phone calls since the banner went up. I wondered if talk about that.
Yeah, that's true. So many people call me about and asking about that, and I said, well, it's first of all, I said it's something like it's art, but they said, can you help me to do something about it or something like that? And I said yes, and I talked to so many people, especially immigrant people, asking how they can go forward. And I said, if you do everything straight and work hard, you can get a good future. That's why.
Thank you. What about Bookie's mother's here? So Erica's here, and her son is Darnell, who is on the picture with his hands like that, and she's been texting me.
There's a microphone right over here. So the question was, what's it like for you to see these murals? In your case, your son.
Well, I go by the picture every morning, every night to make sure it's there. Nobody do anything. But it was so amazing, like, because my son, he was shot 3 times, and when Mary Beth met him, he was working, and he came home. He was like, "Mommy, I met some lady that wants to take my picture. And he was like, is it okay? And I'm like, sure. You know, it's just a picture, you know. And we went on with it, and now he says, Mommy, I'm the king of this city. He's like, you know, everybody's asking, like, what did you do to get on the wall? And things like that. And then the picture, it shows a soft side of him because, you know, he's in the streets and he don't like to listen. So when I see it and other people see it, it's his eyes. Like, you know, you can tell, like, the pain that he was in. But it meant a lot. And it's just a picture. But a picture says a lot about a person, about anything. And I thank Mary Beth for that. Even he was so nervous, he wanted to come, but he stuttered. So he was like, oh. So he was like, you know, Mom, just go and just talk. But yeah, if people go down here and they make videos, they take pictures with him, they put it on Facebook, you know. So it changed him a little bit because he's like, that's me, you know. So, but thank you, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Boogie. I wonder if Mr. St. Louis wants to say something about when I went to the church and unfurled the picture and showed it to people there, and they all cheered and clapped. He's a beloved figure in that church, and people thanked me afterwards for representing the community and the culture in this public way. So I don't know if the St. Louis family wants to talk about how it. And also, look, we're open to people really not liking these pictures. So if you have negative comments, please, it makes the conversation that much richer. So anyway, but I hope Mr. St. Louis doesn't say anything negative.
I was just going to say something quickly, Mary Beth. So you are one of so many wonderful artists doing incredible projects in this state. And Christopher, I saw the Freedom Project, and I was hoping for anybody in this room who hasn't seen the Freedom Project, you might talk about that, because it is another wonderful example of exploring people's lives and combining narrative with visuals and thinking about people's personal stories and how those can be translated to an audience's deeper understanding of the people around us. So I was hoping you might talk to us about that project and what it meant for you, and maybe you have some insight into this project based on the work you've done with Everett.
All right. So the Freedom Project was basically this thing where the genius known as Aaron Jungles had us doing this 36-pound cinder block workout every morning. If you've seen the Freedom Project, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, we build walls and tell stories. The bigger part about it that really made sense was they went out into the community, and it talks directly to school to prison pipeline, the disparity of poverty in the city, and how these things affect people. And then it also shows the human side of who these people are, because we all read statistics. And when we first got together and started doing this, it was like, well, we just don't want statistics. Statistics doesn't really do anything. But what really makes sense is when you put faces to the stories. When you say a child got shot and it's on the news, it's like, oh, a child got shot. But when you say Jerome got shot, down the block, Jerome got shot? What? Then it's a whole nother story. So Aaron went out and he filmed these people with these stories and got some really incredible stories with James Montero and James Montero Jr., me personally with my story, a few other people, and he recorded them. So we have floating heads with people talking, telling their stories. We have a couple of monologues where Grace Jungles is wonderful, superb ballerina. She's dancing, and they choreographed these dances around it. And so not only are you getting the statistics about what's going on in Rhode Island and Providence, because all of the stories are local, they're not from Chicago or Detroit, they're right here in the city. But you're getting the actual people, you're getting the face and everything behind the statistic. So it's not just the number, you're actually your neighbor and his story, the person, the human side of it is being displayed. We're doing it Saturday at 7:30 at the Roger Williams Memorial Park. It's not the full show. It's just a little version of the show. But you know, I would suggest if you didn't see it the first time, come see it. It was written about in all of the papers. And as far as for me, when I've worked in plays at Rights and Reasons and worked in plays at the Black Rep Theater, and nothing I've ever done compared to Freedom Project. When Freedom Project was over, it's like my heart broke. I was doing selfies every day of me in the audience, and then and I was putting them on Facebook, and everybody was like, "Word," and, you know. And then the last show, it was just me in the empty seats, and everybody was like sad faces because everybody that saw it knew how much of an impact it had, not just on the audience members, but on me as a person that was participating. So, yeah, that's it.
Sean, while you have the mic, I'd also like to invite you to share some of your thoughts about Mary Beth's work.
For me, I actually lived in Central Falls for 13 years, and so I can relate very much to her story in Brockton and the changing landscape of the city with immigration and the bringing together of different cultures where people are not necessarily accustomed to living next door to each other. And I live on a very diverse street, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I can go from Guatemala to Dominican Republic, to Colombia, to Cape Verde, all within a half a block. And one of the things that my partner and I wanted to do was to make sure that we had a great neighborhood. And so we walked each door, and in English and in Spanish and in Creole, and asked people to come to a cookout barbecue in our backyard. And they did. And it started, 13 years ago, and we, once a year, have a huge and tremendous party, and I tell you, the food is fabulous. We look after each other in their homes. We're familiar with their families. I've now seen their children grow up and graduate from college. I've seen some of them go to Lincoln School for Girls and then come out and graduate from Boston College. I've seen them work 2 and 3 jobs. They've experienced some of the pain also that you hear Christopher talk about in their families, but they're human people. And so I lay that as my lens through which I witnessed her portraits. So when I went down Washington Street, I saw my neighbors. I saw what would be the plucking of a rose or a flower and then put on display. Because that's really what each of us is in the city. We bring something from all of our backgrounds so unique, but we're all stitched together with a very human thread. We all have families, we all love, we all want to be loved, and we all have pain. We experience many of the same things. And when we actually get together with each other and share a meal or share experiences, we begin to stop judging each other and really understand that we're a strong community and that we all have very, very much similar things. So when I look up at those portraits and I meditate on them for a moment, I see people that I know, even if I don't know your name.
Hello. I just wanted to share my experience about this whole talk. So when this talk started, after 15 minutes, one lady come and she sits besides me. And when the presentation was up, I suddenly realized that she was there. And she was unseen for me, but now I wanted to know more and more about her. She was seen by you. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Tracy. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, everyone. My dad is one of the people who were, person who was pictured by Mary Beth, who knows me for a very long time. And my dad, on last Sunday, in front of the congregation, actually, we got a couple of people here. Why don't you all stand up to see how many people we actually have here? Stand up if you came for Daddy. Okay. All right. My brother's in the back, and I have my supervisor here. She's just automatically Haitian because she's with us. Oh, and my uncle who's walking in. A lot of us are going to be coming in, Ro. But it's not only an honor for him, but it is an honor for the community in itself. When one person is lifted up, everyone's lifted up. And that's how our community felt when they saw his portrait, and they still didn't understand. At this point, they still don't get it. They just go down Avon Street and they're taking pictures and they're standing in front of it, but they're telling people in Haiti about it, sending pictures on Facebook. So they think this man is like Obama, okay? So it's huge. It's huge, and just like Mary Beth says, just one picture says 1,000 words. And Daddy, stand up. He's so shy. So shy. All right, there you go. He represents us really, really well, and he's just been a hard worker. And my mom, who's here with him, Mommy, stand up. You got a pink dress on. Everybody see it. There you go. And just like Mary Beth says, you know, my mom who worked as a CNA for 19 years, and my dad who's worked as a bus driver for over 15 years, and my uncle who also worked as a bus driver and owned his own shop, and my other uncle who retired and went to Haiti and owned his own business, all opportunities that America has given them, and they have taken it and moved forward with it. It's not their taking, but they're giving back also to the community, that they're able to come in, get their residents and their immigrants to become citizens of this country, and then just flourish and provide for their family, just like me, who I'm in the MSW to get my master's. So we're just moving forward, and we're making this community great, and I hope these pictures start to resonate in our community and everyone starts to notice what it is to be a person that lives in Providence. Thank you.
Thank you, Shebna.
Mr. St. Louis, I feel like we need to ask you to say something.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you to my God. He lifted me up. And then I would say thank you so much to Mary Beth. Nothing negative, everything is positive. So now sometimes some people make me laugh. Say, oh, this is Obama Jr. You look like Obama Jr. You look like the movie star. You know, everybody call me, so make me happy. You know, because I can't believe that. That's one thing I can say. This is America. Yes, this is America. So my prayer for America, continue to pray for United States, because in my country, in Haiti, they can do that for me. That's why I think about it. I say, this is America. America opened the door for everybody. Thank you, God. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Mr. St. Louis. There are people in this room whom I asked to be on a banner who said, no way. So, you know, I'm grateful to those who said yes.
We're just about out of time. Mary Beth, I want to give you a chance to make any closing comments.
No, I'm just full of gratitude. I'm full. This has been wonderful. I'm so grateful to everyone who came and spoke, and I have nothing more to add. One question.
Sorry.
Okay, good one. Let's give him the last word.
Just like old times. Huh?
This project isn't just about photos, it's about community and what these photos have gone on and on and on. And it must, you must have someone, you must be very proud. Oh yeah, we are. And I said to my wife when she graduated from college and started this photographing business, my father. When she started this photographing business, I said to my wife, you know, we're going to spend the rest of our life chasing planes and buses to pick her up because she's going to be going here and there, and we're going to have to get her. But she's come along in those years, and she does great work, and I'm very proud of her.
Thank you, Papa. I know what I want to say to end. My mother, if she gets on an elevator on the first floor, by the time she gets off the elevator at the 6th floor, the person in the elevator with her has told her her entire life story and given her a hug and a kiss. My father, I spent my childhood in his truck going to see the Italian guy, going to see the Greek guy's tomato plants, going to see the Lebanese guy and learning how to make the stuffed grape leaves. So they, you know, their interest in Brockton, they never left Brockton. They still live in the house that they lived in. My mother says they're going to have to carry me out of Brockton. And so they really relished the community that they lived in. And, you know, so I thank them for that.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here today. That was really just moving to hear the stories, to think about Sean and Christopher and Annie, you didn't really speak about how all of these community projects come together. Fernando, to hear you talk about what it means and everyone who's here and participated, I just want to say thank you and just do one more round of applause for all of the people who made this possible.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
It's truly an honor here. Well, so there are more of Mary Beth's photos on view in the gallery at City Hall. If you want to take a more intimate look at some of the portraits, I encourage everyone to go check out the Tumblr and read more of the stories, and then to explore the festival this weekend. There really is something for everyone. But I thank you for being here tonight, and have a great night.
I know you're at